Welcome back for this new chapter. In this chapter, we'll understand the database and tables in a conceptual view with some data points around SQL. So, let's start with a quick read of this definition. What is a table? A table is a collection of related data held in a table format within a database. It consists of columns and rows. Just read it and have it in mind. We will see, with an analogy and an example towards in next few slides. So, what is a database? It's an organized collection of structured data, that is tables. So, in simple words, collection of tables and its relations. Let's have this in mind. Let's take an analogy. Before getting into an actual table, we feel that we should give some analogy so that you can visualize and then come back in a technical way. So let's take a library. Okay, in library you can see segments dedicated for each subject. Science will have one rack, history may have one rack, commerce may have one rack, and so on. If you assume your library is a database, your racks or the shelves are your tables, and the books which are stacked inside are your data. So let's go back. If you assume your library is a database, your racks and shelves are your table, and the books which are stacked inside are your data. Right? Now let's go and see a different components within a table. Technically, a table is a structured way of looking at the data. Here we are seeing a table. It will look like more of an Excel sheet or a spreadsheet kind of a structure where you will have columns and rows. The vertical ones are called columns. So how many columns we have in this? 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. The horizontal ones are your rows. So apart from the first one, right, that is your column names, how many rows we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So we have 6 rows and 4 columns. So whatever that has been inside your structure are called data, and these are called the employee ID, first name, last name, designation are called fields, and it will have its own data types, that is their characteristics. When you see here you have employee ID and it has some numbers, then you can call it as a numeric, and here you have the strings or the characters, so it's a character data type. We will see one by one in the later part, but just have this picture in mind. Now we have seen an analogy and how a practical table will look like. Let's go back to the definition. What is a table? Table is a collection of related data held in a table format. In the previous slide, you have seen what is a table format, how it will look like, the components, right? The columns, rows, and data, and so on, correct? Now, what is a database? Collection of such tables together with a relationship between is called database. Okay? Hope you have understood that. Now, let's go back and see a little bit more about SQL and its background. It is essential for somebody taking up any subject for that matter need to understand why you are studying this. You need, because you can't randomly go and pick any topic and do it just because your job demands. You need to have a little bit of background, and then when you study the subject further, the productivity that you are going to bring out will be much more. So that's why we feel we should start with those basics. So first we will start with very simple, very basic stuff. When you complete your certification and everything, you may be wondering, should I tell I'm a SQL developer or a SQL developer, right? So let's start with that. You can pronounce SQL is like SQL and also SQL. The first one, that SQL, is what recommended. Nevertheless, people are still calling it a sequel, which is easy to pronounce in terms of when you are quickly talking to somebody. You don't take a pause and say SQL, rather you can say SQL. Both are agreed. Initially, it was coined as, when they developed the sequel, they coined this as a sequel only. Because of some copyright issue, they changed it to SQL. However, doesn't matter, you can call both SQL and SQL. And if you look at this carefully, it has been developed or invented in 1970s, which is roughly 50 years from now, and it's been in the use from that. And from 1986 onwards, there is a specific standard has been maintained for SQL. Earlier, it was very less number of databases. Now you can see a lot of DBs are coming into market, like kind of data warehouse like Nitiza, Teradata, Oracle, DB2, even Cockroach, Mongo, all those stuffs are coming in. So this standard has to be maintained across all the databases, because when you study SQL in Postgre now, tomorrow if you want to work in Teradata, you don't need to do too much of learning again. All you need to understand, okay, what is the architecture of Teradata, how I can fit them. More or less, the queries or the SQL statements will remain same, except few keywords probably, which you will learn eventually. And it is 51 years in use, and still it is ruling the market when it comes to data. So now history is done. Let's see, why do you need to learn SQL? If you're somebody wanted to get into a data domain, interested in data, you need to understand this, why SQL is mandatory, because SQL is used everywhere. It's in high demand because so many companies are using it and the numbers are going really high. Nobody is avoiding SQL. There is no alternate route for SQL. And SQL is still the most popular language for data work in 2021. It's been 50 years, still the most popular language. Though there are a lot of languages came after it, still SQL tops the list. Let's go and see. When I say SQL is everywhere, look at these logos. The companies using SQL: Uber, Spotify, Netflix, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I mean, these are your. You might have at least 4 or 5 apps in your mobile by now. And all these companies are multi-million companies are still using SQL in their backend. When you book a cab through Uber, it hits your SQL DB in the backend, and that is being used for further analytics. And you are getting a personalized recommendation. When you are listening to a specific songs in Spotify, it is also being stored in a database coming back. So all these are being still the SQL database are being used. There are SQL transactions have been made between each and every call that is being pushed from your mobile. So the top companies like Uber, Spotify, Netflix, Instagram, even Facebook using SQL. So now you understood why SQL is important even in 2021. Since you have seen the companies are using SQL, now just let's go and see the facts actually. This is like, from the job portals, what are the skills that actually a data domain or data companies are looking for from the public market or in the from the candidates. Let's go and see that. SQL is the most in-demand skill among all jobs in data. They may put a data scientist, data engineer, whatever may be within the data domain. Almost 42.7% of all job postings asking for mandatory SQL experience, which has good knowledge in SQL, is mandatory in almost 42% of your job. Next is your Python, next is your machine learning and Spark, so on. But SQL is in high demand. If you're somebody who wanted to start a career in data, you might be starting as a data analyst. When you're opting for a data analyst, what is the most demanded skill? SQL, almost 60%. And it doesn't mean remaining 40% doesn't need a SQL. No, they might haven't explicitly mentioned that you need SQL skill, but when you enter into a data domain, you need to have the skill, else it would be tough. When you have this, it will be handy. Whatever role, whatever career path you pick and choose, it will be very easy for you to navigate, because most of the cases you will be dealing with structured data. Even if you are dealing with unstructured data also, those metadata will be in structured. So having this knowledge will be very handy. And anywhere, if you go into a job, you would be having an access to a SQL client where you can play around with the data. When in the case of Python and all, you may need to do a lot of additional scripting stuffs, and you have to import libraries, download stuffs. A lot of things are there. But when it comes to SQL, it's very simple. Very quickly, you can do the analysis as an analyst. And if you are somebody, yes, I am a data analyst already. I want to go into a data scientist or data engineer. Almost 50% requirement asks for good SQL knowledge. It has been mentioned explicitly, and I assure that even the 100% is also looking for SQL. Without SQL, you can't survive. So now you understand the background of SQL, when it was invented, how long it is in the market, how SQL is really impacting the business, like in the new digital world, like Uber, Instagrams, Facebooks, and Twitters. And what a wonderful language that you're going to learn in this series. So have this in mind and understand this concept end to end. We will see the importance of PostgreSQL in the next chapter. For now, we're signing off. Please write to us if you have any questions. We're happy to assist you. Thank you.